Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar. Today is World Food Safety Day, and I'm very happy to join Kitty Appels to present you this talk about food safety standards. So,
Good morning, everyone.
good morning, Kitty. Nice to see you today. For those who don't know Kitty, Kitty is a well-known food safety expert with more than 25 experience in the food industry, almost like mine. We are around 25 years, so young. She's co-founder of several businesses around food safety, so food safety experts, Food Strategy Institute, and the Food Recall, which are online training, coaching, mentoring, consulting organization that aimed at supporting as well food safety professionals as also organization, and also a lot focus on transformation, right? From
Yes,
as we
and how to
discussed,
do it.
how to do it
How
and not
to do it,
and not
yes.
what and eventually
Yeah,
why. So you understand a very good organization. You also a lot of experience in due diligence, and Kitty is also an international speaker and author in the areas of quality and food safety. And I'm sure that a lot of people around here have already experienced or read your some of your contents. So welcome, Kitty.
thank you. Thank you, Bruno, for the introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here live this morning. It's early in the morning, 7 a.m. for us. So hopefully you are joining us. I'm not sure if you can put in the chat where you are
So
because
we
I'm
have Maha
hoping
from
that
Los
people
Angeles,
have sound.
Bosnia, the Philippines, Denmark. So a couple of people
Okay,
around.
yeah, so we are really international.
Yeah.
Welcome. Well, for those who are not familiar with Bruno, he is an international consultant specializing in product integrity. And after studying veterinary medicine and working for 23 years in the agri-food industry, Bruno followed by 2 years of food quality and safety standards as the technical director of the IFS. And Bruno is a chef founded in Telegram, in
Integrally.
Integralim, in is it
Integrally.
French? Is
It's supposed to
Integral.
be international.
Hope I pronounce it in the right way. This consulting company's mission is to assist companies and organizations in enhancing the integrity of their systems and products. And Bruno has worked in 25 countries and held 12 positions at the local, operational, functional, regional, and corporate levels. And with Integralum,
Yeah.
it's really, sorry,
No problem.
difficult word for me. He has been involved in various projects with the GFSI, the WTO, and the GSSI. And additionally, he supports companies and organizations in optimizing their organization in quality systems.
Thank you for this presentation.
You're welcome.
We'll have to rehearse the integralim part
In,
for the.
Integralim. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So the topic of this World Food Safety Day is about food safety standards, saying food safety standards or standards save lives, and that's why we wanted to have a talk around food safety standards. And obviously, we want to speak about all the food safety standards. But what I want to mention is that it is, of course, very important for us that you ask questions, because we are part of it is indeed to give a bit of content and context about how we see the evolution of food safety standard. But the most important thing is also we want to offer this hour, this for you to be able to question us and see how we can help you there. And maybe to start, because there is, we often speak, and there is sometimes a confusion of GFSI standard. It's not GFSI standard, it's GFSI, benchmark standard or recognized standard, because GFSI doesn't do certifications, so they do not own the standards. Could you tell us, Kitty, a little bit about what is GFSI to our audience?
Okay, I'll try to explain it. GFSI is the Global Food Safety Initiative. That's GFSI. And they are supporting the food industry for over 2 decades in their efforts to ensure food safety. And GFSI brings together important players in the food industry to work together and improve food safety management systems globally. And the goal is to strengthen and standardize food safety systems so that they can meet the needs of the growing global population and establish markets that can deliver safe food regardless of where the consumer is located. So GFSI has 3 main areas that they focus on, and that's benchmarking and harmonization, capability building, and public-private collaboration. And the vision for the future is a world where consumers can trust that the food they buy is safe, and also the feed that they buy is safe, that everyone involved in the process of bringing food from the field to the plate understands their responsibilities in ensuring the food's integrity and safety.
Yeah.
Also companies and governments worldwide, they work together to make sure that everyone can eat safe food. And of course, it's also important to train your staff, but also to train the inspectors, the authorities. So they have many aspects that they are focused on. And their vision is, of course, to get safe food for people everywhere globally.
Yeah. I think it's indeed we know more about this benchmarking part and less about the capacity building and also all the work that is done in the relations between public and private sector, because it's something where they have worked a lot in the last 10 years, I would say, especially in the last 10 years. And today they are really driving the standards. I mean, driving in that sense that we have seen in the last years and especially in the last year or in this year, a lot of changes, and some of them are indeed pushed by changes in the requirements of GFSI. So that's why it was important to start with this.
Yeah. Well, I'm a bit curious because I often see some questions in documents that people are asking for certain GFSI certificates, or that you need to have, for instance, an IFS certificate. Maybe you can put in the chat what kind of GFSI schemes you know.
Yeah.
Let's try to make it a bit interactive. So please put in the chat the schemes you know that are a part of the GFSI umbrella.
Because let's see if we have. So which schemes do you know?
Already told one, IFS.
Don't spoil it.
Don't spoil it.
So we had Madeleine, Agatha, Hafsa, Valentina. It's your turn. Maria, Susanne. Maybe it's too early for them. No, it's not too early for them.
No, yeah. I'm not sure if the chat is working at my side.
No, it is. Well, anyway, so maybe, the point is, Maria has answered all of them.
Okay.
Maria. FSSC, BRC, IFS, SQF. That's exactly, and we don't know Maria. Nice to meet you, Maria, Philippines. But these are the 4, actually, the ones you have mentioned are the 4 biggest ones. in the transforming, I got also in the processing manufacturing side, because we have there is another one, the primary sector, which is global gap, which is also recognized by GFSI, but it's not the sector we are the most familiar with, I would say, Kitty. So we
Yeah,
will talk indeed a bit about these
yeah,
four. And Maha says about
yeah.
gap. Yeah,
These four are I think most people know one of
yeah,
these, maybe a few of these standards. In total, at the moment, I believe GFSI has 13 different
yeah. Standards.
standards that are a part of GFSI. So if you ask to your suppliers if they have a GFSI certificate, and they can
Recognize.
present their IFS or a BRC or an FSC 22000, or even the Global Gap, or the Canada Gap, or one of the other standards. Yeah,
That's one of the things maybe that we can comment is upon, is that actually maybe sometimes something that is not yet fully implemented is the one certified, recognized everywhere. And indeed, it's also our responsibility as food safety professional, when we are requested another GFSI recognized standard, although we have one, to stand our ground and to say, okay, I have IFS, or I have BRC, or I have I'm not going to have another certification. Please consider that these standards are recognized. And I think it's important to not to say, okay, oh, it's the commercial, the sales part did an agreement. We have to teach them also to say,
yeah,
okay, all these standards are recognized. So we are offering this one. This is the one we follow, and because it creates also confusion. Besides cost, also in the organization, and what is people don't need to know that there are so many standards. One I think is
yeah.
well enough.
I'm not sure if it's a misunderstanding of a lot of people that they don't really understand what GFSI is, and the
It can,
schemes that are part of GFSI, because at least in Europe, a lot of retail ask specific
yeah,
standards. If you focused on the UK market, and you need to have a BRC. If you're focused in France or in Germany, it's often IFS.
yeah,
And you're located in the Netherlands, you can have all of
both.
them. So that's always a difficult discussion with purchase of the retail, to explain to them, well, we have one of
Yeah,
the
one of those.
GFSI standards, so it should be fine, and you can accept it. But it's still a challenge to
To do.
get an agreement with them, that if you have IFS and they require BRC, that they say, well, okay, we're fine with it,
Yeah,
because often these people don't know the differences between the standards, and if it's really necessary to have
yeah,
a
the other
specific
one.
standard.
Yeah,
So maybe we can then go bit deeper in this topic. Bruno, in your opinion, because we have these 13 different standards, if you
mhm,
focus on the four big one, the FSC
mhm.
22000, BRC, IFS, and SQF. What are the most important updates in the food safety standards in the last year?
Yeah. So the last year, so including the since 2020, actually, that was when the last version of the GFSI benchmarking requirements came out.
Yeah,
There are several changes, and indeed in the last months, we have had BRC, FSC, and IFS who have done the new standard. What's interesting is that there is one topic that really is on top, because it's by all three of them, probably for different reasons, but at least there are is one of the main changes is about food safety culture. So this is it's not about, actually it's not a hot topic, it's a fundamental topic, the ground of what a food safety system should be. And
hmm
we can see that BRC, IFS, and FSSC have really made an effort in explicitly saying what is expected in terms of food safety culture, in terms of communication, training, feedback from employee, and performance measurement. That's the four thing that we find across all standards. So for me, was one of the major ones. What about you, Kitty? When you look at it, what is the one which is for you also important?
Well, for me in food safety, everything is
Yes,
important.
of course.
If you look at the changes in the schemes, um, what I see is that, well, these schemes get changed because the auditors find a lot of observations during the audit, and then the owners of the schemes find it important to create some additional rules on these standards to help you to improve your food safety. Of course, we have the Codex Alimentarius. They are often in the beginning of many of these changes, for instance, a food safety culture, HACCP or validation, even change management. So if they find that it's necessary to write additional aspects in the Codex Alimentarius, then you can see that the schemes follow this in their standards as well, including the amounts of observations that they see. So, but I was a bit surprised that IFS already wrote a new version because I think version 7 launched 2 years ago, and now
Yes.
they already have version 8.
Yeah.
So it's a lot to handle as a QA manager, that you need to implement these new rules in your quality system, and also to get all your staff and management on board to make these changes. So what I see is that there are additional requirements on HACCP. And of course, HACCP is a systematic approach to identify, to assess, and to control the hazards that you have in your production facility and in your processing. And you can see that over time, a lot of changes are added to the requirements, because in a lot of years ago, around 1994, we just started with HACCP, and it was a decision tree, and that was it.
Yeah.
And now we have many requirements.
If I may say, the HACCP is a bit the core of this food safety management system. It's really the heart, or the core of the heart.
Yeah.
And indeed, what I think is you mentioned is important is about so it's not about having a HACCP study somewhere in a closet, and that has been done. It's really something. What is really important is really that it is alive, and that the companies, and for me, it's also part of food safety culture, that for any changes that you have within the company, you ask yourself, or the organization ask yourself, not the food safety and quality manager, because it should be at the head of the organization. Okay, I have a change. Does it represent a risk or not? Should I inform the HACCP team, yes or no? And that this decision is somehow transparent for everyone. And then comes indeed the validation, that it's validated, that okay, the change, I've looked at the change, I implemented it, and then validate that my measures are okay. So I think it's quite important. Maybe just a comment also, Kitty, what you say about IFS. The change of IFS, as you said very well, it comes from different parts, right? It's come from GFSI, from the codex, from all the changes outside, but also from the experience in the audit. And one point is that they had changed the way to evaluate. In their standard there was a sort of A, B, C, D, and they did a big change 2 years ago with the B, which was not a deviation, but a sort of improvement, possible improvement, and that didn't go well. So I think it was good from IFS to recognize it quite
Yeah, because
quickly. And
everything can be improved.
yeah, exactly. And then so the auditors have difficulties, the company, so they came back to the previous rule, but of course with a new changes in GFSI, that means that if it's a deviation, a very small deviation, then you have to correct it
Mhm.
before being certified. That's still a change for
Yeah,
IFS. So
yeah.
that's one of the reasons.
And of course, it's important to keep your standard alive and to have a certificate, because many clients ask for your certificate. But the goal is to produce safe food.
Yeah, it's not
And
about
when I look at our clients at their HACCP program, I often notice that it is a more of an work that is performed on an island. It's the QA with a few people, and we write a lot of things down that we think that we are doing, and then the auditor visits the company, and then they notice that what is written down in the HACCP program isn't exactly the same as you work in your company. And of course, then you receive an observation or a non-conformity or a knockout, and differs from how severe and which scheme you have. We help a lot of companies in recalls. Authority doesn't look at what kind of standard you have implemented in your organization. They are focused on you need to produce safe food. And if something went wrong, they will dive into your system to see what did you do and what didn't you do it exactly as you wrote down, and then you can have severe issues with authorities. So it's very important to write down in your HACCP program exactly the way that you work. And that's really, really important. Because yesterday we had a food safety law event in the Netherlands, and one of the lawyers said, well, in the Netherlands we have an additional rule. It's an informative rule, but you need to follow it, otherwise you're wrong. But one of these issues was that this lawyer said, well, if you have issues in your processing part, and you're not producing conform what is written in your quality program, then you need to notify the authorities. I didn't agree with this lawyer. I read the legislation differently, because there's also a legislation in, at least in Europe, that you can have an HACCP program, and you need to write down how you are working in your facility. And if something is wrong in your production facility, you need to block your products, because you are allowed to do that. And if it's blocked, you don't need to notify authorities. If it is already placed on the market, of course, you need to do that. So food safety is huge, and we have a lot of standards to follow. We have a lot of legislation to follow, and they're not always easy to read. What you need to do, why you need to do it, and how to do it. So, and one of these standards can help you to know what you need to do. I'm not sure if they really explain for you why you need to do it. That's where we can help. Duino can help, and a lot of other people can help you why you need to do it. And the next challenge is how are you going to do it? Yeah. So please, if you have questions, put it in the chat. Then Bruno and I can dive in that aspect a bit further. Another aspect that is very important is that you need to validate what you wrote down.
Yeah.
You need to validate your CCPs, but also you need to validate your HACCP program. The flow charts that you created, are they really conform the way that you are producing?
Yeah, and actually one maybe important a tip, which is for those who don't have it to go in mind, is validation is before. So you have validation before, monitoring during, process and so on, and verification is after. So all what is verification is how your system is working. So a HACCP system, indeed, it should be at the core. It was changed in 2020, I think, in 2020 the codex. And you must have it, as Kitty said, as operational as possible. It's part of a due diligence, right? It's something that is due, that you, and as you mentioned, there are
That's
some
not easy to validate, I know. And I noticed that and sometimes I see reports that people say, well, we validated, for instance, our metal detector, and then I dive into the documentation, and then in the end I see, well, the validation wasn't proved. And QA thinks, well, we did the validation, we have the report, and that's it. So please read also what's written down in the reports by your staff to be sure that
is done.
it's validated. So, and of course, one of the aspects that is also very important is change management. Everything that's changing in your facility, you need to be aware of which aspects do you need to change in your HACCP program. Maybe you need to validate new things. Maybe you have new lines, new equipment to dive into. Maybe they need to be clean, so you can start your cleaning validation all over again. So it's a lot, I know.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah. Do you have other things that you see?
In one of the points, which was also highlighted by the three, mostly by in BRC, FSSC in 2000, IFS, it was a bit so explicit, not explicit, but implicit in the requirements, but a very simple one. But it's about equipment. So how it's not just about having a cleanable and hygienically designed equipment, but really how do you make sure that this is the case, in particular when you purchase equipment or new equipment. And BRC, FSSC have really highlighted the different steps of more detail in BRC, of course, as always. They go very detailed and prescriptive, but it's also interesting. I think that it's also something that is also interesting when you are following a standard, to look in other standards how they address this, because it can also
help. Yeah,
we can help in the how to do it. So really, what is highlighted is all the process from actually planning this new equipment, choosing it, validating at suppliers side, and also before implementing it or using it in your line. So this is a new requirement, or something which is very, very strongly highlighted there. So hygienic design.
Yeah, well, our clients, I always advise, well, you have HACCP, to implement also an HACCP team around this part.
Equipment.
That you have maybe a monthly discussion, depending on how big your facility is, and then how many changes that will be coming your way. To have a meeting with your technical department, your product manager, maybe your plant manager, to see, well, which changes are we going to do in the upcoming months? Are we going to buy new equipment? Yes or no? if they are thinking about buying a new equipment, for instance, a new metal detector, to have a meeting with them. Well, what are the requirements that they need to follow? Because it's so important that you, as a QA, are yeah, you're not really responsible, but you are the one that needs to get all the people on board to and get in their heads. What are you thinking of? What kind of improvements are you seeing? What kind of equipment would you like to have? It needs to be easy to be cleaned, etc. And of course, you can dive in those standards to see if they have additional requirements. And especially for equipment in Europe, we have EHATCH. I'm not sure if you are aware of EHATCH, but they have a lot of documents free to use on their website. So you can download that, and they have a lot of good insights to be aware of when you buy equipment.
There's also the 3A in the US. They also have a lot of training material available about that, videos, online training. If you want to have more information on it, I would say also you talk about bigger company with bigger organization, but I think that also when you are a smaller company and that you have requirements to be certified, don't hesitate also to have your suppliers work, let's say, for you in this topic. So be very clear in the purchasing paper and in the discussion that you have through maintenance or through the purchasing with the suppliers. So, okay, we need you there. We need you help us prove, validate the design of the equipment, because at the end, that's they very often have the capability and possibility to do it, and they know it from other customers all around the world that they have this kind of demand. So it's also pulling.
Still, you need to think about your requirements.
Sure. But I just mean that when you don't have
these equipment companies are not working with their own equipment.
No,
for instance, our oven, my husband baked eggs in our oven, in our combi microwave, and it exploded last week. So he needed to clean the microwave, and then he became angry because it was very difficult to get in in all of the corners. I said, well, these people, they design this equipment and it's very good to use. But they forgot.
Not very well to clean.
How are you going to clean your microwave when you have exploded egg in your microwave? So I think for the upcoming months, we will eat additional egg in our food.
extra protein.
So always, check your own what are the requirements that you have yourself or your company has. Maybe your clients have additional requirements as well for you in their purchasing agreement. So check that as well, what is necessary, and validate.
Yeah, always
necessary.
validate.
Yep.
Any last high point that we could mention about food safety standards, the evolution that we haven't talked about?
Well, I noticed that FSC has released a new version as well a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And of course, there's always the challenge. They release a new standard, then you have a couple of months that you are audited against the previous scheme, and then you are audited against the new scheme. I think the difference between the standards, if they will give you non-conformities immediately against new standard, or that you have a few additional.
You have transition time.
Yeah. So if we look at FC 22000, they have a new requirement on product labeling and printed materials.
Yeah.
And of course, we have a lot of legislation globally on product labeling. So it's important to know that these standards only give you guidelines to implement how to look at your product labeling and what you need to do, but you also need to check the legislation of the country where you produce your products, but also the legislation of the countries where your product is placed in the market. And that is a challenge as well, because, for instance, if I produce something for India, it's difficult for me to read the labeling.
Yeah.
So, and also very difficult for me to read the legislation or even to find the legislation. So, and that's always a challenge. But if we look at the requirement of FSC 22000 regarding product labeling, I think it's in 2.5.2 that is changed. And they added that you need to validate certain claims on your products. And on claims, there are many countries that have additional legislation on claims. And that you can put healthy claims on your products, or claims like it tastes like apple, for instance. But also claims like which kind of allergens are inside of your product. And notice that allergens are different in every country. Even in Europe, we have our 14 allergens, but the severity of the allergens
depends on the
they are different in every country. Of course, nutritional information is important to put on your labels. Also, how the product is made. You need to be aware of what kind of things you need to write down on your labeling. Raw materials, which country of origin are the materials coming from, and that's always a challenge as well, because sometimes you don't know where the ingredient is coming from, especially if you have a broker that provides you the raw materials. And of course, traceability is important. And you need to check from beginning to the end, of course, with your labeling, but also for your packaging materials to see if everything is all right.
It's true that it's allergen. Actually, allergen mislabeling is one of the major causes of recall worldwide. And indeed, I think that's something that is very often not that well controlled. Let's say that from as you say, from the design of the printing, the validation of this design, is it because also the copy paste function exists everywhere, and sometimes the designer will copy paste. You give him a good text. From experience with the standard writing, you give him the good text, but he finds the image he wants to do in another place, so he takes the text from another one and then he copy paste and erase something. So the validation of that, and also the online validation, have I put the right label or the right packaging to the right product? This is also something that
or the printer uses a stamp and has product A and product B next to each other, and then they cut your packaging, and then it can be between each other. So I had several recalls on that aspect as well. And of course, in your facility, line clearance is very important, because maybe the packaging is okay, but then if you don't check your machines, if your labels are really 100% removed from your lines, if you don't check that, it might end up in the production of a different product, and then you need to recall as well. So that's all those aspects, and the different aspects from printing, designing a label, printing the label, getting the labels at your facility, and put it on the line. That all needs to be checked, and also the traceability needs to be there.
So yeah.
So that's a very important aspect
Okay. Sure.
to dive into, and it will save you
A lot of
potentially.
definitely. So there are lots of there are all other kinds of changes, right? In the standards, the objective of today is not to look at them all. So if we can list environmental monitoring, corrective actions, there are a lot of topics to look into it. And of course, if you have a question, please, I don't hesitate to put them there during this chat, because we are here for you. If you have something in your mind, or something that bothers you, or any question, what maybe we could do in this second part is indeed look at how to implement it, no, or difficulties that we have in the implementation of the food safety standards, right?
I see we have a question. In your view, what is a good way to embrace all the requirements on food safety culture in an effective way? Can you say something about that, Rob? Bruno?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Rob, for the question. I think it's indeed right to the point, because it's how to implement it. And the most important thing, in my view, in food safety culture, it must come from the top. If you don't have the top management involved in what you do in food safety culture, change the company, because you cannot change the boss, or do something else. You need to be able to convince the boss of the company that it is very important for the company, for the people. Food standards save lives, and that food safety culture is something that will enable it. I just have an example of the typical thing, that wrong or mistakenly comprehension of standards, where FSSC 22000 and ISO 22000, you have to have the context of the organization. So auditor or consultant comes by, and then the quality manager says to the boss, we need to do a SWOT. And the boss says, well, what is a SWOT? I don't know. Don't worry, I will do it. And so I've seen SWOTs done only on the quality department. And if you want to embrace it, no, it should be something that you do about the company, the risk and opportunities for the company in terms of food safety are important to share, to understand together. It's not about doing a SWOT on a paper for just the auditor or for the certification. This is ridiculous. So to embrace it, I think it's go to the top manager, and sometimes it's hard, for sure, but he needs to understand that it's not your problem. It's really his task to help facilitate the improvement of food safety culture within the company. I don't know if it answers, Rob, your question. And other topics maybe in the implementation that we may have seen.
Well, I'm curious, for people that are joining our webinar, maybe you can put in the chat which requirement of one of the schemes that you have is a challenge for your organization. Because there's so many requirements in all these schemes.
Yeah, that's true.
And a requirement can be difficult for me, but can be easy for someone else to. So please, could you put in the chat which requirement is a challenge for your organization? For instance, I had a discussion yesterday on the food law event with a quality manager that works in the dairy industry, and allergens wasn't an issue for her because milk is an allergen and everything is milk.
Yeah.
And she hardly has any allergens. And we had a discussion with someone that worked in the bakery for ready-to-eat focaccia. We have a lot of ingredients on top of it. That person had a real issue with allergens. So it's very difficult for one organization to implement some requirements, and it can be very easy for another facility to fulfill. So C validation, yeah, that's
one of the topics.
A really difficult topic to implement, and often doesn't matter which part of your standard you need to validate.
Yeah.
It costs a lot of time. Yeah.
There is the effective validation done by the company, but don't forget that there is also external validation is possible. I mean, using scientific validation, or when there is industry association in some country, they have guidelines or good practices where this is validated. So I mean, this is also a validation when a food industry association. There are cases in, for instance, I know I can speak in France where the good hygiene practice are validated by the authorities. So when you have in terms of prerequisite programs or things like that, you don't need to justify new everything when it has been done. So validation is what you can do yourself in the plant, but also what others do and how you collect this information to justify the choice that you make. But the worst case is indeed to have so you have a control plan, but you cannot explain why you do twice a day or every change of shift, or it must be risk related.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we have a question about Rua. How do you see an effective way to implement the novel food standards or regulations in a country? That's
another one. It's an important one. I don't think we have the time.
There was a huge topic yesterday at the Food Law event on novel food, and this lawyer explained, well, in Europe we have a novel food legislation, the 2019/1381, and in that legislation is mentioned which steps you need to follow to get an approval for novel food. Of course, it's a difficult aspect because you need to get the approval of EFSA in Europe to get some products on the market. And if the product wasn't on the market in Europe before 1987, I believe, then you need to ask for a novel food approval. But in the legislation, there are several aspects that sometimes it's not necessary to ask a novel food approval. And there is a shortcut to ask an approval by your local authorities to see if it might be a novel food, yes or no. And according to this lawyer, of all the questions the authorities in the Netherlands received, 30% got a message that it's not a novel food. So 70% is a novel food. And then you need to get a lot of documentation to send to the EFSA, and I know at the website of the EFSA is mentioned there are a lot of novel food asked to get approval. So it takes many years to get the approval.
And of course, novel food depends on each
Yeah.
country has a different novel food approach. There are foods
Yeah.
that are not novel in some countries, like when you talk about insects, which is one of the high trending novel foods in Europe. There are a lot of requests for validation as novel food. Of course, in other Asian countries, this is not a novel food. So this is something that is part of the culture of the company. So
But it's
it's a
not allowed to put in the
yeah,
market in Europe, and we see a lot of cannabis products at the moment.
yeah,
So I also had a lot of questions, and also to get the certification on their process. I said, well, of course, I can help you to get a certification, IFS, BRC, or whatever, because for the standard, it doesn't matter what kind of products you're producing. But for the authorities, you will
yeah.
get an issue because cannabis isn't allowed at the moment. It's a bit of a gray area at the moment because we have a lot of cannabis products already in the market globally. Um,
Especially in the Netherlands. No,
uh,
sorry.
also, even in tea or whatever,
Yeah,
a lot of cannabis. But if you look at the legislation, it's not allowed
yeah.
at the moment. So it's depending on the authorities how they are handling these kind of situations, and that's a bit of a black box also for me.
Oh. There's a question about distinguishing between PRP,
Oh, that's one of
OPRP.
the challenges. Yep.
I don't know what PV. Do you understand PV? Preventive. I don't know, Maha, what you mean with PV. But if I may explain about PRP or PRP and CCP, something which is very important. So the prerequisite programs, as they say, is something that you should have managed before doing a deep dive in hazard. And the way for me to explain is
Mm.
control
Yeah.
is that actually when we started in 1994, indeed it was my first ASAP was even 1993, I think, in my experience. For each step in the line you say, oh, what happens if the operator has not washed his hands? What happens if there is a fly? What happens if the machine is not clean? What happens if so and actually you should, all these kind of risks which are outside the food manufacturing process, they should be handled through prerequisite program, so that you say, okay, it is handled, so let's focus in your risk analysis on really what's happening from the raw materials to the processing steps. Where are the hazards and the risks? So that's for PRP. Of course, this PRP, what's important is that you verify. It's not just about having a procedure written, but that you verify regularly how it functions, that it's effective, through inspections, through different kind how do you say, of tools. You can verify that your PRP are working. If we look at OPRP or CCPs, critical control point, actually these are really measures that you have in your system, in your process, that really can help reducing hazard risk. And when they are really, let's say, something that it's measurable, you have a critical limit, it's something where you know that that's one point where you can really destroy the microbiological hazard or reduce a risk, then it's a CCP, depending on your decision tree or questions or criteria. If not, it might be something that you do on the operational level that helps reduce the risk, but it's not the critical one. I think that for me, what's a bit new in this in the last codex and the last view is that really, at the end, it doesn't matter if it's a CCP or a PRPO. Both are equally important in the way you handle it. It's something which is done to reduce the risk. So you have to pay attention, you have to train the people, you have to record it. And of course, the outcome is different. If it's a CCP, in my view, that means that the product is unsafe directly. So that's where you have to block the product and so on. if it's a PRPO, it's not that immediate risk. So it's more, and it's also something which is more broadly, and that doesn't mean that you have to really stop the product and so on, but you have to improve, because that means that something is getting out of hand. I don't know if you agree with this
Yeah.
this way of explaining it.
FSC 22000 has a different document for PRPs, so I think it's you can download it from the internet, I believe. So you can follow that one. If you have BRC, I know it's very difficult to find the PRPs in the BRC document. So it's helpful to
look at
to download the FSC 22000 PRP guideline, and then you can see more easily in the BRC what are the PRPs for BRC, but they're not very open in saying, well, this is a PRP. PRP is, for instance, your building, your walls, pest control, those kind of aspects. For OPRPs, you can think of, for instance, you produce infant nutrition, a baby powder. In the baby powder, you add some vitamins and in your production. But when you produce the baby powder, the vitamins are dosed manually often. So it might be a challenge to see if the blender did the right thing and mixed it in the right way, and is it put in your packaging in the right doses, or maybe one of your staff forgot to put vitamin A inside your product. You will not notice that. Well, you can notice it when you need to check everything. You need to check everything, but sometimes it's checked. Yes, I put it inside the blender, and it's okay. But when you send your product to the laboratory, you might get a notification. Well, there is no vitamin A inside, or too low vitamin A inside. To have the baby eating this product once, it won't be this huge food safety issue. But if you forget to put vitamin A inside your products for weeks, or this mom bought a whole tray of this product, it will be an issue. So an OPRP is something that you will notice after you produced your product, and you don't have time to make changes to your product. That's more of a differentiation I often use for what is an OPRP, and especially OPRP and a CCP. In the end, it's about food safety. Everything needs to be safe, and it needs to be validated. It's working correctly, yes or no. So
we have a question for Rua. That's an interesting one. What is the best food safety certification? If I may say, I think actually there is no best one.
I think
if you decide by yourself, it must be the one which is the most comprehensive for you, the best to apply. You must have good trainers and good people in your country about this. It must be used, but I think it's very important to know what is the market that you have if you have to choose, in my view, because it's not the same if you're in the US, but it's more SQF would be. If you are in Europe, it's more IFS. If it's international England related, I would say it's more BRC, and then you have FSSC, which is a bit more global and more management system based, but it's really really related to the market, the market where you are, and accept or knows, it's not to accept but knows the standard.
Yeah. Often retail asks for a certificate like a BRC or an IFS. So, and the rule I used is often, are you producing B2B, business to business? Please use FSSC 22000. If your clients ask specific for a BRC or a IFS, and well, it's in a contract agreement, then yeah, you need to have one of these standards. Yeah. And if you are your products will be placed in retail, yeah, then it's important to see what kind of requirements does this retail have for you. And try to have a discussion with them if you have, especially in Europe, we have many different retails, and they ask IFS and PRC. So a lot of companies have both schemes, and in the end, I don't think it's necessary to have two schemes. I think
one is one. I fully agree.
Enough. And according to legislation, it's not you're not allowed, you're not obliged to have. It is not mandatory to have a scheme. You need to implement HACCP to produce safe food, and these schemes help you to produce safe.
That's true. There's maybe a last one, and because we are already a bit over the time, but yeah, the Robert is asking about 100% based traceability system. Is it still viable? And it's an interesting question, because actually, you know, the standards, they say you should have 4 hours to wrap up the traceability and to have an effective traceability, including mass balance. So that means the calculation of what input and output. And I think that really today you should aim as a food safety manufacturer for digitalization of traceability, because you really want to have as quickly as possible this sort of basic answers about traceability, what came in and when, and what was recorded, and not waste time in that, especially in times of crisis. And maybe it's one point that to convince the top management is really to have this focus. Imagine, boss, if we have this issue, a recall issue or a crisis issue, and we need to answer to authorities or to customers or make a decision. If it takes 10 people, as I have seen, 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours to get information, and they're not even sure that is the right one, because sometimes during the audit you say, oh no, it's not the right first time, then it's you will fail in a lot of aspects. So I think the digital part. Thank you, Rob, for guiding us into the future. But I think digital should be also part of food safety culture somehow. Yeah. Okay. What I propose is that actually, if you have still questions, you can put it in the chat, and also in LinkedIn for the events, and look for us in LinkedIn, Kitty, myself, and please connect with us. We can follow, connect, whatever you prefer, and ask your question and see how we can help you.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Kitty. It was a pleasure to have this discussion
yes,
with you.
I enjoyed this very much, and I hope it was helpful for also the people that joined the webinar, that you got new insights.
Yeah. So let's stay connected, all of us. I mean, and have a wonderful World Food Safety Day ahead.
Thank you, Bruno, and thank you for organizing this.
No, it's a pleasure.
Okay.
So
Have a great day, all.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great day. Bye.